For those of you that don't know me, I'm Lindsey Leach and I'm Head of Retirement Living in the North. And today I am joined by my colleagues Richard and Kate, and I will let them introduce themselves.
So, hi everybody, good afternoon. My name is Richard Wheeldon. I'm one of the heads of retirement living. I think Lindsey will be talking to you later about the structure changes, so I won't preempt that. I'll hand you over to Kate.
Hi everyone, my name is Kate Lester and I am the Projects and Change Manager in Retirement Living.
Okay, so next slide please for our agenda for today. So today we'd like to talk to you about some of the things that we are busy doing in retirement living at the moment. So first of all, we're going to have a review of the service charge budget process, which Richard is going to take us through. Richard?
Okay, next slide. So I'm just giving you a quick update on the service charge journey that we've been through, and you'll all currently be underway with service charge meetings right now. And if you're not currently aware of when your next service charge budget meeting is, it literally will be just around the corner. We've done a lot of work for this year's service charge budget meetings. We've listened to what residents have to say, and we've improved the training with the people that come out on site to present the budgets to you and prepare the budgets. And we have a whole new set of documentation in place, like I say, based on feedback that we've had from residents. The content of the budgets themselves has also been impacted by four key areas. One of them outside of the control of Housing 21, but the government has introduced an increase in national insurance contributions, and I'll talk about that a little bit on the next slide. We've also taken the opportunity to look at how we calculate our sinking fund contributions and the stock condition surveys, and the scope of that's been widened. We've re-evaluated our management charges, and as we're all breathing a sigh of relief, the energy costs have stabilised somewhat. So what I'll do on the next slide is go through those last four items, and I'll save the top item for the last slide. So next slide, please. So yeah, these are the four key changes to the content of the service charge budget. So as I said, we've seen a stabilisation of energy costs, and we saw a dip in the year ending March 2024. So that meant that the high budgeted costs we'd had for energy, electricity and gas were much higher than the actual costs came in at. So that generated a £12 million excess income to the service charge budgets nationally. So when we came to finalise the year-end accounts up to March 2024, we were left with a surplus that we then carry forward into the budgets that we're currently preparing. So that's good news in that we're carrying a surplus. And it's further good news that with energy prices stabilising, that we've been able to also reduce the energy budget by 15%. So surplus carry forward acts as a buffer and a reduction in the energy cost by 15%. Well, what that's allowed us to do is to look at some of the other items within the service charge that Housing 21 doesn't currently recover. People might not be aware there's a whole host of items that Housing 21 could recover from its service charge, but has historically chosen not to recover. And that amounts to around £5 million worth of cost every year. These are costs that are eligible for housing benefit, and they are a mixture of contract servicing costs and renewal costs. So things like cleaning equipment, refuse containers, laundry equipment, TV aerial systems, they're all capital items that we could include in the service charge. And the servicing of automatic opening ventilation systems, dry risers, lightning protection, or automatic doors where those are fitted. So where schemes have those facilities, we could and should be recovering the capital cost of those items and the revenue cost of those items. And for 25-26, we've included those in the service charge budgets. On a plus note, that £5 million that I referred to earlier, £3.6 million of that equates to the cyclical redecoration costs. These are costs that we could recover from the service charge, but we're continuing not to recover those from the service charge. And any increases that you see in your budget will be offset by the energy costs that I talked about a moment ago. The next item is an item that was announced in the government's autumn budget statements, i.e. an increase in national insurance contribution costs. That means that scheme employee salary costs, which are passed on directly through the service charge, will increase. And we budgeted around £800 per full-time equivalent person for those increases. And then the final change is in relation to management costs. A bit like the non-recovered costs, it's an item that we've been aware of for some time. The timing wasn't right to introduce it during a cost of living crisis. But this year we've chosen to include the outcome of the review that we did of the management costs. So these are the costs that cover the costs of managing all the services that you receive at the scheme. We're continuing to stick by the good practice method of having a fixed fee rather than a percentage. But we've reviewed these costs, and under that review we've identified that we're under collecting by circa £3 million. So that has meant that you'll see the management fee increase in retirement living somewhere between £2 and £2.50 per week. Final slide, please. So I know I've taken these out of order, but now referencing the material that we've put together based on resident feedback, we've totally revamped the service charge budget template, so it's much cleaner, much easier to read, and it's got a minimal amount of information as we possibly can tolerate to make it easier to understand and easier to read. We've renewed all the guidance and support for managers, so they should be much clearer on what they're presenting to residents. And a big change has been the new guide to understanding your service charge budget. This is quite a comprehensive guide that hopefully, if you're not able to attend the in-person meetings presenting the service charge budgets, this guide will talk you through everything that you need to see to understand what the figures are that we're presenting to you. The guide's been revamped to include lots of frequently asked questions. Crucially, it's got guidance in there to differentiate between what we charge through our rent and what we cover through our service charge, and that's a key change. And there's much greater clarity around what costs are eligible and not eligible for housing benefit or the housing element of universal credit. There'll be much more comprehensive post-meeting notes coming to you, and then finally in February, when we deliver the notification of the new service charge and the budget for the coming year, we're currently working on the design of that final notification to you, and again we'll be using the resident forums to design that. The final thing to say is we're still committed to the in-person consultation meetings. And there'll be somebody there who can clearly explain the proposed budget and answer any questions that you have. We'll be circulating a post-meeting questionnaire so we can continue to gather your feedback. And then, as I said, the final piece of work will come in February next year when we give you a summary of all the figures for the coming financial year. So that's me done on service charges. If I go back to you, please, Lindsay.
Thank you, Richard. So I'm just going to touch very briefly on our journey to C1. So if I could have the next slide, please. We had a summit, Retirement Living and Extra Care came together, and we had a summit in Manchester a couple of months ago to work out how to plan best for the regulator's visit on the 20th of January 2025. So at this moment in time, we're very busy pulling together all the evidence that we need. The regulators will be attending residents' meetings early next year to hear directly from you. And we welcome the inspection and our opportunity to showcase our deep commitment to residents at Housing 21 and to show that everything we do, we've got you at the heart of it all. So I just got a couple of pictures that I just wanted to make reference to. So the gentleman on the screen is called Darren, and he is a blind Olympic athlete who came to our summit and gave us a very inspirational speech. But I just wanted to say that as part of his presentation, he had myself and Ali, one of our extra care colleagues, playing blind football. So I was blindfolded in high-heeled shoes playing football in front of all my colleagues, but I have to say I did win. But yes, it was very good. We had lots of other inspirational people there to help us plan our journey to C1. And then in the evening, you'll see the bottom photograph, which is our MDs, Pam and Chris. Me in the middle, and the lovely Kate that's on the screen today with us, and Tracy from Extra Care. We did a back to school quiz. If I said that there was a lot of cheating going on, I think I'd be right. So that's our journey to C1. We're very, very busy planning for that. So yeah, any questions, please put in the chat for the end. And if we could move on to our people and property visits, and I'll hand over to Kate.
Lovely, thank you, Lindsay. Hi everyone. So I introduced myself at the beginning, but I am the Projects and Change Manager for Retirement Living. So my role is to speak to our operational colleagues, so all of your local housing managers, and look at our processes and how best we can improve on what we're doing at the moment. So I'm really pleased to be with you today to talk about our new process that was launched in October, our people and property visits. So we know that in retirement living, one of our key priorities is to deliver a high quality, consistent and professional service. And to help us achieve that and ensure that our residents are getting the support that they need, we are continuing to see our properties are well maintained. We've worked with employees and residents to produce our people and property visit process. So the purpose of carrying out the visits is an opportunity to access every flat on our scheme at least annually. So we'll be looking at inspecting the property, but more importantly, checking on the welfare of our residents. That is the sort of the point of the visits. So the visits will ensure that our residents are aware of all the support that we offer them, so their wellbeing needs are still being met, and that we are aware of any outstanding issues within the property. So that might be repairs that have been missed or any damp and mould issues that might not have been reported. So we would encourage you to continue to report those as you see them, but it's our chance to make sure that the properties are being upkept as well. So they're intended to be a one-stop shop for all of you. So we carry out lots of compliance tasks with you already. So we come in your properties and carry out pull cord checks. We update your resident information forms, and we fill in person-centred fire risk assessments checklists, as well as a full version if that's required. So the intention is to encompass all of those things that we already do with you into one visit. And like I said, with that additional focus on your wellbeing and offering that support in a much more convenient way for both our employees and residents. So I've just put a little bit on the screen there what to expect during your visit. So it's personalised time. It's your chance to discuss any concerns or questions with Housing 21 employees, so your local housing managers, in a safe and private setting. It'll be a comprehensive check. So just like I've mentioned, we'll conduct all of our usual property checks with you so that your home remains safe and comfortable. And we'll offer any additional support. We'll address any immediate concerns, any needs that you may have, anything we identify with you for any support that we can offer or that we can signpost you to. So we are launching these hopefully much more efficient processes, which are designed to support you and capture all that evidence that Lindsay just talked about. So the regulator of social housing, this is something that they'll be looking for, but I'm pleased to say this has been in the pipeline with us for a long time. So it's something that we really wanted to do with you and for you, rather than it being, for the regulator, but that evidence will also contribute to the regulator's findings and evidence that they come and look at for us in January. So we've put it onto our system. So hopefully it eliminates some of our paper-based forms that we complete with you. And the idea is that, we don't want it to be intrusive. We wanted it so that, we can stop some of those ad hoc visits every time there's something new we want to ask you. So it's a very new process. We are open to feedback and we're constantly looking to improve the process. If you do have any suggestions, we'd be more than open to that. Next slide, please, Jess. So I just thought I'd share with you some of the feedback we had. So we ran a pilot before this was launched earlier this year with 2 of our retirement living patches. So that was around 850 residents that were involved. So we had 19 schemes that completed the pilot, and out of those 19, 15 of them reported that they had no refusals to any of our visits. And those who did, it was less than 5 residents, which is really positive. We had 63% of those schemes in the pilot identified issues that they weren't aware of, and 53% of those schemes in the pilot signposted residents for additional support. So we've had some really positive outcomes. So we've had different people trial different methods. So, we can either do it floor by floor, a couple of residents a week, but ideally we want to book appointments with you. We want it to be convenient for when you're available. So some feedback from our employees is that they were able to complete the visits very quickly. It was good to get to see some of the properties that they wouldn't normally access. Once some of the residents had visits, they were happy to share their experiences with their neighbours, which in turn made it a little bit easier for the visits to complete. I think that's the easiest way to get something across is word of mouth. And the visits will just become the new norm, so it's something we'll offer at sign up for our new residents. And more importantly, some feedback from our residents. I've saved this till the end. So we had one couple that were identified as having no flooring. They had no carpet throughout their property. The residents advised that this wasn't required for them, but it allowed the local housing manager to be aware of that and have the conversation with them and offer support of our Helping Hands fund that could offer, if it was a financial reason that they couldn't afford that, offer that support. They could also record that on the person-centred fire risk assessment for future reference. We had multiple repairs that were identified and raised so as to assist with the upkeep of the property. We had referrals made for vulnerable residents to adult social care as there were some risks identified, so the residents received the help that they needed. We had residents who were self-funding, so they were paying all of their rent and service charge and not receiving any benefits and identified as struggling to pay all of their rent. So benefit checks were completed and consequently applications were made and successfully received, meaning that their rent and service charge was paid by housing benefit. And my favourite one, at one court, we had a resident who dressed up in a suit because he was so looking forward to the visit and was excited to show off his home to the local housing manager. So we had some really, really positive feedback from the visits at the beginning of the year and successfully launched in October. So if you haven't had one of your visits yet, hopefully you will do over the next coming months, and then we'll be looking to complete them annually. But like I say, any feedback, any questions, direct them to your local housing manager. I'm sure they'll come back via me. So thank you very much. I think I'm handing back over to Lindsey.
That's great. Thank you, Kate. So I just, again, briefly want to touch on the new structure in retirement living that Richard alluded to. So up until the 1st of November, this was the structure. So there was the north and the south. Previously, Richard was head of the north, but as most of you know, he went off to deal with our leasehold portfolio, and I stepped up to cover head of the north, and Jen has been the head of the south region. You can see from the picture that it means that Jen and I do a lot of juggling to try and cover a lot of ground. So our managing director, Pam, took the decision after speaking with us that we would move from a north and south structure to, next slide please, 5 region structure. So as you will see from the lovely map, the North region will be headed up by myself. The West region will be headed up by Richard. The East region by Jen Davis-Dean. The Southwest by Anthony Walker. And the Southeast by Sarah Dodson. And the idea of there being 5 of us as opposed to 2 is that we will clearly be more visible. We'll be able to get to more places geographically. But the key thing for this new structure is that we deliver quality and consistency across the whole of our retirement living services. So that new structure, whilst it's sort of slightly embedding as we speak, because we're in the service charge period, and of course we're gearing up for the regulatory visit in January, our journey to C1 that I mentioned earlier, we're not changing any of our systems. So at the moment we're still reporting north and south, but Richard and Jen and Anthony are sort of getting themselves acquainted with their new patches, and that will come into effect on the 2nd of January. Okay, so that's the restructure update. Benefits for our residents, as I've said, clearer visibility, increased resident engagement. We want to get our community engagement much stronger, so that will allow us the time to do that. We want to get our MPs and local authorities engaged with us and our schemes, and we also want to provide great value for money. So those are the key benefits to us, there being 5 of us as opposed to 2. Okay. And now I'm going to hand over to Richard, and he's going to talk to you about the renewal of the emergency call monitoring service contract. Richard?
Hi, back to me again. So next slide, please. Yeah, I'd like to bring you up to speed with our call monitoring tender. This is one of Housing 21's largest value contracts and probably one of our closest partners. And the current contract has been in place since 2014, having been extended at certain points during the last 10 years. But now is the time to re-tender that contract to make sure that we're getting good value for money and to make sure that we're working with someone that can give us the best service. It's an essential Housing 21 service in terms of it provides that continuity of a 24/7 service. Pretty much in retirement living, you have local housing managers that work a variety of hours, but they're all during the day. So this provides a continuation of some degree of emergency cover for a full 24/7 period. But equally in extra care, where there's a small on-site care team, and if they were to be dealing with an event at that site, and there was another call that came in, it ensures that if the care team are away dealing with another matter, that call is going to get picked up if somebody needs some help. So essential for both retirement living and extra care. And if residents are in need of emergency assistance, then it provides that assistance. It's also critical for the safety of our buildings. All our new fire alarm systems are fully linked through to this service, both in communal areas and within properties. And that's the current content of our fire alarm system renewal specification. That means that you've got somebody intercepting calls, making sure that the fire brigade are notified, making sure that the fire brigade can get into the building, and being able to differentiate between somebody that might have burnt their toast and set off the system in their domestic setting, as opposed to somebody that is actually in need of assistance and the fire brigade needs to be called. Layered on top of that is a 24/7 out of hours emergency repair service. So that complements our duty manager service, whereby there's always somebody from Housing 21 on call to deal with any emergency situation. But this allows us to continue providing a repair service out of hours if there's an emergency repair needed out of hours. As I said, it's one of our largest value contractors and one of our closest partners, and it generates circa 250,000 calls every year, and probably 50% of those calls are made outside of office hours. So it ensures that somebody there is there to pick up on whatever type of emergency or whatever type of incident has occurred on a scheme 24/7. So if I flick to the next slide, please. There we go. So this review of the call monitoring service and our plan to re-tender that service has been ongoing for quite some time now. And many of you may remember that we circulated a survey amongst residents to gauge their views on what was important with that service. We had a really good response. It was just short of 1,000 replies, which was a really good response and much more than we anticipated, which enables us to get some good quality view as to what residents deems to be important from that service. So this is less about the technical equipment and about the service if you need to use that service. So ranking very, very important. So probably not a huge number of surprises, but calls being answered quickly is on there. And there is a standard to which calls are answered in that, off the top of my head, I think it's 97 seconds. 97% of all calls are answered within the first 60 seconds, and 99% of calls are answered within 180 seconds. And our current provider exceeds 99% on both of those measures. So that remains one of the top priorities, that calls are answered quickly. But then it's when the call is picked up by our call handler that it's also important that it's very clear. There's a clear line of communication between the resident and the person handling that call. And that person handling the call knows something about the customer's needs, so they'll have some information related to their medical history or any needs that they have, or next of kin or emergency contacts. All that information is important that it's there and available to the call handler. Whilst translation services don't feature highly in terms of percentage, obviously that varied from region to region, and where there's pockets of people where English isn't their first language, then you see those rates increase. So whilst it might not, you might not perceive it to be a fundamental part of the service, it is important that the call handler is able to provide that service. And interestingly, 75% consider it to be very important that calls are followed up, and I think this is crucially important at a time when the 999 emergency services have a variety of response times and a variety of escalation of the urgency of calls, whereby if there's just a call for assistance, then the 999 services might not respond that quickly. So it's important that calls are either followed up with further actions by the call handler, potentially to next of kin, potentially to emergency points of contact, but also if the resident needs to have continued contact whilst they're waiting for emergency services to arrive, that's vitally important as well. So these results were good to see, because we've been able to work them into the specification with which we've gone out to tender with. So what residents have asked for very much features in the quality aspects of the tender documentation. If we could have the next slide, please. So where are we up to? We're probably a little bit behind schedule because there's been so much to include in the specification, but we went live literally last week with the tender documentation. That means that we're going through a two-stage process for shortlisting suppliers. The first stage is called the SQ stage, which is just stands for supplier questionnaire. And that allows us to sift through any interested party with a number of pass-fail questions, as well as some of the qualitative questions. But predominantly, it's making sure that the suppliers that have applied for that tender are basically up to the job. And all that evaluation is done internally within Housing 21. So you'll have different teams looking at different aspects. So obviously there's a big technical aspect to this contract. So the technical people look at that element. There's a big operational aspect to it, and the operational people will look at that element. The intention is that we get to mid-January, whereby we've shortlisted which suppliers we want to invite to the more detailed stage, which is the ITT stage, and that just simply means invitation to tender. So we'll go to invitation to tender late January with a month to turn that around. And we then have to evaluate those tenders. So again, a great deal of it will happen internally, that we'll meet in person with the suppliers that have tendered. Different teams will look at different aspects again, and we'll meet with the supplier to make sure that we fully understand all the technical aspects, all the operational aspects, etc. I mentioned on the first slide that we'd included out of hours 24/7 repairs. Within the specification, we've made that a separate part of the specification. The view is that the primary purpose of these suppliers is to provide an emergency response to people in need. And whilst you could argue that repairs might form part of that, there are also specialist providers of out-of-hours repair services out there. So our ability to split the two elements of the contract might mean that if we're not totally happy with the out-of-hours repair side of things, we can take that out of the contract and we can look at that being provided elsewhere. But for the time being, that's tagged on to this contract. We then get to the final bit that you can see on that slide on the right-hand side, which is the resident panel. So it's vitally important that we go back to residents and ask for their input. And this is where it gets really, really difficult. And this is where we potentially need help from residents. So if I just move to the next slide, please. So yeah, it's a huge logistical problem. How do we get so many people's input to a vitally, critically important contract for Housing 21? without going to just a questionnaire process, and it probably doesn't lend itself to a questionnaire type process. So what we're proposing to do is, when we've been through all the internal shortlisting of suppliers and through all the invitation to tender questions and validating what they have to say, it'd probably be quite difficult to get a lot of residents all in one place at once to meet the shortlisted suppliers. And equally, the suppliers also have a limitation in terms of how much time they can spend away from their business to facilitate that. So the proposal is that we have in-person groups of people at scheme level. So that might be lots of people visiting a named scheme. And we meet with those people, we brief them on what the tender includes, what specification includes, and we go through a bit of a briefing session in terms of what the residents want to see from those suppliers. We have the suppliers all based centrally, but we create a live link with those suppliers. So rather than just getting everybody onto a virtual call where they can get a little bit out of hand, at scheme level, those meetings will be facilitated in person by somebody from Housing 21. And those groups of people at each scheme, so that we can probably have half a dozen or more schemes dialed in via a live link to basically interview the shortlisted suppliers with the questions that they want to answer. We'll help to facilitate that. We will provide the in-person facilitation, but it gives you an opportunity to have that live link with the shortlisted suppliers, and then we can get feedback from quite a wide customer base. So my ask here is, let us know if you're interested in being involved in that, because it's something that we want to organise, and it's something where we want as much input as we can from as many people as possible. And I think that's my quick whistle-stop tour of the procurement process. If I hand back to Lindsey, please.
Thank you very much, Richard. So that's all the hard work that's been going on in retirement living. But now for some of the fun things that have been going on. So quite a lot of you will have been involved or are due to be involved. I know we've got a few late ceremonies taking place for our In Bloom and local diamonds of 2024. So here are just a few of the pictures. I didn't manage to get to as many celebration events as I would have liked to, but the two that I did go to, there were so many amazing stories, and I've seen so many amazing pictures of gardens, and I think we've come to the conclusion that our residents being outside and having something to eat is the key to making every event a successful one. So yeah, we've had lots of presentations and meetings with lady mayoresses or the mayors of various places, lots of amazing stories from residents, but most importantly, residents from different schemes getting together and sharing what goes on at their scheme. It's the couple that I did go to have been amazing, but I know that lots of the operations managers, well, all the operations managers and the regional operations managers have been attending these events. A few more pictures. I think it's safe to say great fun was had by all. And finally, if you haven't already got your thank you banner for your scheme, your local housing managers and operations managers have chosen between the two that you can see on the screen now, and it's just a banner to say thank you to you, thank you to the local community in our 60th year. It's been an amazing year. And I'd just like to say thank you to you. You've all been absolutely amazing. So give yourselves a massive round of applause. Okay, so that's all of our presentations. We'll be quiet now. Well, we won't, because we'll answer your questions if there are any. So do we have any questions that have come through? Yes, I think we do. So let's have a look. Okay. Oh, I get off quite lightly here because most of the questions are for you, Richard.
Yes.
So,
Do my best.
the first question is, the government clearly didn't intend for employers to just pass on the national insurance costs to customers. Why has Housing 21 done this?
That's a good question, isn't it?
It's very good.
They probably didn't intend to do so. And my reading of the newspapers since the budget, I've read quite a lot about these costs having a huge impact on different industries. But I think it is a bit more clear cut with service charge budgets and service charge contributions, in that local housing managers or any scheme-based employees are just funded directly by the scheme through the service charge. So it's every element of the employee costs have always been passed on to residents, whether that be pension contributions, national insurance contributions, all the office running costs, everything to do with that person being on site, providing a service to that site, is picked up wholly by the residents of that scheme. But there are lots of instances where I'm not sure the government fully considered the impact it would have in those costs being passed on.
Okay. Thank you very much. Next question again on service charges. Why do we have to wait until 2025 to be credited back service charges that we paid in 2023, 2024?
Yeah, this is where it gets complicated, and I can absolutely understand people finding that both frustrating and maybe confusing. It relates to how service charges are structured, that you literally have a service charge budget for, let's say, year one, in which you might generate a surplus or a deficit. And that surplus or deficit isn't known until that service charge year is closed down and all the accounts are audited, which is happening during year two. So you're paying a new service charge budget for year two, but you don't know the outcome of the service charge expenditure for year one yet. So therefore, when it becomes known whether there's a surplus or a deficit during year two, it means you can't do anything with it until you're preparing the service charge budgets for year three. The alternative is that we get into a process of refunding or demanding surpluses and credit surpluses or deficits, which becomes really, really messy, and potentially even more messy if you have a churn of people living in properties. So it's a generally accepted process that fits with service charge statutes, that year one you might create a surplus or deficit. Year two is when it becomes known and audited that you have a surplus or a deficit, and then year three is when you add it back into the service charge for that coming year. I'm hoping that explained why it takes so long to see the outcome.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Richard. Okay, a couple for you. On the property, people and property visits, question is, can I choose when I can have the visit?
Yes, absolutely. So the idea is that they are convenient for both residents and employees. So although we are encompassing all of our compliance tasks that we need to do, and we will have certain timescales that we need to do those within, yes, we'd absolutely encourage our local housing managers to book appointments with you. So if you do have prior commitments, if you work or if you have appointments, then yeah, we want to work that around you. So we have template letters that we can arrange that appointment with you, so you've got it to hand. And if you need to change them, just get in touch with your local housing manager.
Okay. And another one on the people and property visits. The visits sound invasive. Do I have to have one?
Oh, that's a good question.
It is.
It is. So we would normally be coming into your properties to do certain checks anyway. So the pull cords being a prime one. So we check your pull cords every 6 months just to make sure they're working. So if you ever need them, so like Richard talked about for the call monitoring system, that they are in working order. And we know there's lots of times where we are in and out of your properties for different things, but the point of the visits isn't to be invasive. So they are what you make of them. So we are there to offer support. We are there to make sure that we feel that you are supported and that you are still living well in our properties. But actually, if you just want the compliance elements carried out and you're quite content and comfortable that you don't need anything further within that visit, then that's absolutely fine with us.
Okay, that's great.
Thank you.
Call monitoring question. Richard, the current service is really poor. I hope you choose someone new. Not really a question, but
So I can't maybe speculate on who we will choose. Everybody, both the current provider and who we expect will tender for the continuation of the service, and a whole host of other industry providers we're hoping to express an interest. And then, as I say, we will whittle those down through the supplier questionnaire review to the people that we choose to invite to tender. I would hope that we invite at least 2 or 3 others in addition to the current provider through to tender. And then it's a case of looking at a combination of their technical capabilities, their infrastructure, their customer service, the quality of the service, and look at all those different elements. One of the things that springs to mind, this has cropped up before when I've visited different schemes, that we often find that residents are on the older analog systems and they haven't had the new digital systems installed, get a bit disillusioned about the length of time it takes to connect a call. So our current provider responds to all types of calls within 99 point something percent within the allotted time. So within the first 60 seconds, it's always 99.4, I think it is off the top of my head. So they clearly do pick up those calls quickly, but if somebody's using old analog equipment, then it takes a little longer for the connection to happen between the two. Whereas if you've got the newer digital equipment, then that connection is instantaneous. So people on digital schemes should find the services much quicker. We've also listened to what people have to say in terms of building up the quality of the service once you do connect. So the current specification has limitations in terms of how much control the supplier has of dealing with different situations, and a lot of it can be handed over to the duty manager, whereas there's much higher expectations in terms of what service we get when somebody connects and somebody has a problem, whether it's a scheme-wide problem or an individual problem. Just jumping back to the analog connection type question, that Housing 21 is hugely ahead of the game in terms of new digital installations. We're probably at about 80% of schemes are now linked through to the supplier via a digital connection, and the expectation is that the final phase of the programme will be completed very soon, which will mean all of our schemes will have a digital connection, which means all of our schemes should start to enjoy that calls are answered within 60 seconds, 99.4% of the time.
Brilliant. Thank you, Richard. And last question. I'm really interested in participating in the selection of a new provider. How can I be sure to be asked?
So we're not currently asking, we're probably testing the water and making people aware that we'll be asking for help and involvement. Once we've got a subgroup of the project team together to start coordinating the satellite resident connections, then definitely you'll hear the message, and if you are interested, you're absolutely welcome. But you will see it notified in more than one location. It won't just be things like the local newsletter. We'll have other methods of letting people know that this is about to happen, and if you're interested, we'll absolutely bite your hand off.
That's brilliant. So there you go. Watch this space. That's it for the questions. There is just a statement from one of you on the call that says, thank you very much, a very informative session. So in response to that, I will say you're very welcome. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. Stay warm because it's going to snow tonight, apparently. Stay safe, and we look forward to seeing you all again very soon. Take care. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.